So there is no UFC card on this weekend, but what we are going to be getting is the first round of the Road to UFC 2025 tournament. If you guys are unfamiliar with the tournament, it has been going on for 3 or 4 years now. I believe this is the fourth year of doing it, where fighters from all over Asia and now Oceania are going to be fighting in a tournament, and the winner of the tournament at each weight class is going to be receiving a UFC contract. The first round for this year's is going to be taking place over 4 different episodes on 2 different days, with the first one being this one on Thursday at 7 a.m. Eastern Time. The shows, the tournaments are broadcast internationally on the UFC Fight Pass website, and if you are living in Asia, there is a pretty good chance that it is going to be broadcast on TV for you wherever you normally do watch the UFC. As for this card, I do think it's going to be a tough one to predict, but I'll be honest, but I think it should be a pretty good one. I mean, most of the time, these Road to UFC matchups do end up being very, very entertaining. Now, as for the article on the We Want Picks website, I don't actually have an article up at the time of me recording this video, but I'm going to do a full Road to UFC breakdown in article form on the We Want Picks website very, very soon. If you want to read that, do sign up to the We Want Picks website, use my code ARTEM, use up my affiliate link as well, and you will get a 10% discount off your first membership. Another thing as well that you guys have really been doing recently to support my channel, and I'm very appreciative of it, was subscribing to my channel. Over the last few days, you guys have been subscribing. I've been noticing, and I really do appreciate the support. I did recently hit 9,000 subscribers, and now we're nearly at what, like 9,200. I think that maybe reaching 10,000 subscribers genuinely is a pretty viable sort of goal, I guess, because I think that I'm the only person that's going to be covering Road to UFC. So if you're interested in that, please do subscribe to the channel. And with that being said, let's now move in to the first fight of the night. And before I do that, actually, I do want to give you guys just a little bit of a tip. If you want to do your own research for this card and you're struggling to find tape, the way that you want to do it is you want to search up these fighters' names in their native language. So for a lot of these fighters, of course, their names are given to us in English, but of course, their names are actually in Mandarin or in Chinese for Yin Shui. And then for Feng Xiaocan, of course, also once again in Chinese, you can find it there on the Tapology website. You want to search that up. If you just search that up, you're going to get a lot of interviews, but also if you do scroll through it, you're eventually going to find a lot of their fights as well, and it does make things a lot easier. Now, as for the first fight of the night, to make things confusing, this is actually not a tournament bout. This is a non-tournament bout, which pretty much acts as a contender series fight, where the winner of this fight will probably get a UFC contract, or maybe not, depending, of course. But Feng Xiaocan, if you guys are unfamiliar, did fight on the contender series. No, she didn't. She fought in the Road to UFC tournament last year, and she did lose in the finals to Ximing, who knocked her out in the third round with a massive comeback KO. And Ximing actually went quite viral for that. But before that, Feng Xiaocan was winning the fight. Feng Xiaocan was landing more strikes, and I do think that she was going to be ahead on the judges' scorecards. Unfortunately for Feng Xiaocan, her biggest weakness is her striking defense. She does not have very good striking defense, and despite being absolutely massive for this weight class at 5'7", and she is a big 5'7" at 115 pounds, she doesn't really seem to use her size all that well, in my opinion. I do think that she doesn't use her grappling enough. You know, I think that if she used her grappling, she would have maybe had a little bit of an easier time in some of these tournament matchups, of course, beating Miki Matono. Miki Matono did take her down a few times as well, which does tell you that she does have a bit of a takedown defense problem too, because Matono was so much smaller than Feng Xiaocan in that matchup. She is going to have a size advantage once again over Arisa Matsuda, who I do believe is probably who the UFC wants to win in this fight, because Matsuda genuinely is a very fun fighter to watch. She is a boxer, and she's a very good boxer at that as well. She actually does come from a professional baseball background, which is pretty interesting, but of course baseball is massive in Japan, so it's not too surprising that she has, played as a baseball player before. But in MMA, it's kind of worked out relatively well. Her boxing is very, very good. She's very fast. She's got very good movement, and she does have pretty high volume as well. Now, she hasn't really fought the best competition, which is what I really want to talk about here, because the one fighter that she has fought that was quite good is Machi Fukuda, who's now fighting for Ryzen now, and actually is finding a lot of success in her own career. I actually believe that Fukuda could have and probably should have got the decision in this matchup. You know, Matsuda, of course, was doing the more damage on the feet as you would expect in a wrestler versus striker matchup, but I did think that Fukuda in the third round had a submission attempt, and the second round also kind of the same situation, a lot of control. And even the first round as well, Fukuda was looking pretty good on the feet. In the clinch, he was landing a lot of knees. So overall, I think this was an odd decision. I mean, if you wanted to watch it, definitely do, and let me know your opinion on that yourself in the comments. But I do believe for this matchup specifically, if it's going to be a striking matchup, Matsuda is the better striker. I think that Matsuda is a very good boxer. She's got very fast hands, very high volume. And Feng Shuai, as I did say, that's her biggest weakness. Her biggest weakness is striking defense, and she can get pretty caught out moving backwards if you do land combinations or throw combinations against her. She does freeze a bit. She kind of just puts her hands out there and freezes. And that's what Matsuda does. Matsuda's got a good jab. She throws a lot of 1-2s. And I think that Matsuda can find success in the striking here against Feng Shuai. And now we have the first tournament matchup that is on Tapology here at Flyweight. And this fight is going to be a lot of fun, guys. I'm telling you. I'm really looking forward to this one because it is between a very dynamic and pretty technical striker in Wataru Yamauchi and Namsrai Batbayar, who is just an absolute madman in the cage and genuinely also has a lot of very fun fights. To talk about Wataru Yamauchi, this guy is a pretty big guy for 125, despite only being 5'5", and overall does have very technical striking. The problem that I do have with Wataru Yamauchi a little bit though is once again that striking defense against Joe Arai. This, I'll be honest, was a pretty hard watch for me to watch because Joe Arai knocked him down pretty badly in the first round, and then from there, Yamauchi was never really able to pick it up, and in the end, that third round KO loss was actually quite brutal. But aside from that, man, as long as the fighter's on the feet, Yamauchi, for the most part, does find a lot of success striking. I do worry a little bit, though, with the lack of head movement. He is very static in there as well. Like, he stands very upright and throws a lot of kicks from an upright position and doesn't really move all too well aside from that. But I do believe, technically, he is the better striker out of the two in this matchup because Namsrai Batbayar, I can tell you guys, when I say this guy has no control, he has no control everywhere. On the feet, he is swinging wildly. When it comes down to the wrestling, which I think is his best part, he's a wild man, you know, like if he shoots for a takedown and even if he gets it, his opponent is going to try and scramble and he's going to scramble with him, and he just doesn't really ever find moments in fights where he is like fully in control. You know, he's always quite loose in there, and it's kind of hard to explain without really watching his fights, but for the most part on the feet, he's throwing massive hooks, he's overthrowing a lot of things, and also when it comes down to the grappling, just kind of once again, the opponents are able to escape positions pretty quickly. He does have a loss to a fighter you may recognize because he's actually in the UFC at the moment, Yamjagal Tumendembarel, but aside from that, he has actually fought a couple of other opponents. Now, I was struggling to find tape on him, I will be honest, because my little cheat code didn't really work, so I had to watch what I could, and to be honest, it was mostly highlight reels, and it was mostly highlight reels of his recent fights. There was kind of like a fun little build-up between these two guys. Jinbo Zhou was like taunting Namsrai Batbayar, and I kind of seemed a little bit out of my understanding, not being able to understand their language, but it seemed like Zhou was trying to get very personal, but you have to watch the fight to understand what I mean, because it did seem like I could have interpreted it the wrong way. But Zhou was he was saying some stuff potentially, just kind of with the actions and the props that he was bringing into the cage to promote that fight. But anyway, aside from that, I did see him beat Savak Kinjayev as well, and honestly, in that fight, it really was the wrestling that did matter. But these two weren't really the best opponents, of course. And Zhou is now on a very big losing streak. Now, this comes down to just kind of one main real thing for me, and it is the wrestling for Batbayar. I don't like Yamauchi's takedown defense. I did notice he's got bad striking defense because he got smoked by Joe Arai. But before that, I was watching some of his matchups as well against other lesser opponents, and he was getting taken down in those fights as well. I have actually seen him attempt takedowns too, but it's hard to tell how good his grappling is going to be, and I think if Batbayar does go out there and shoot for takedowns, I think that that's a pretty good sort of way for him to potentially win. So I'm going to go Batbayar here, who could maybe be the underdog if odds do drop for these fights. And now we have Keiichiro Nakamura taking on Yeojin Park, and this is honestly going to be a lot of fun. And watching Yeojin Park's tape was very fun for multiple reasons. The main reason, I will be honest with you guys, is his nickname is Young Boss, and the promotion that he fights for, Black Combat, doesn't have his name listed down the bottom like Yojin Park or his name in South Korean, or in Korean, sorry. It's Young Boss. You know how like it could be like Conor McGregor versus Nate Diaz, and McGregor and Diaz are the two names by the bottom. It's Young Boss, and the commentators also call him Young Boss. He's actually a pretty hilarious guy to watch. And one thing I will also mention as well that I should have mentioned before, this guy is 6 foot tall at 145 pounds. This is one of the taller featherweights you will ever see. And what was surprising to me was he's not the biggest featherweight that I saw watching tape on him. This opponent here, Sang-Hyun Park, was a lot bigger than Yojin Park, and I was wondering, is this at lightweight? You know, has he come down to 145 recently? And the answer is no. This is a fight that took place at 145, and Sang-Hyun Park was massive compared to Yojin Park, who was 6 foot tall at featherweight. So South Korea, man, must have some massive featherweights. For the most part, though, I was able to watch as many of Yojin Park's fights as I possibly could. For the most part, Yojin Park is a wrestler, I would consider him to be. I don't really like his striking all that much. He does use his height and range pretty well, but for the most part he is just striking using very straight punches, and a lot of the time he looks to the ground when he does it too, which I don't really love all that much. He does have a pretty nice left hook on him as well, but I think for the most part he is just trying to pressure forward and throw straight punches. I said for the most part a lot in this video, I do apologize. And I was able to watch him fight against most of his best opponents. He fought against, of course, the former UFC fighter Wee Chul Nam. That's a throwback, and I will be honest, I did not know that Wee Chul Nam fought in the UFC until I looked at his Tapology profile, because I would say he was the best fighter that he has fought against, and he just smoked him. He genuinely smoked him on the feet. And of course, from there, I did watch a lot of his fights where he was using the wrestling a lot. Ayori Jelly, I would also say, was probably one of the better opponents that he has fought, but Ayori Jelly gassed out quite badly in that matchup in the second round, and also was just kind of getting smoked with the takedowns. Yojin Park, his wrestling's okay. Now, the thing is, I wouldn't say it's fantastic, but I do think it might be good enough to take down Keiichiro Nakamura, who hasn't really fought the best opponent. He's been getting a lot of big KOs. I wasn't able to watch all of his fights, I will be honest, because the only real main fights that I could find of him was this matchup against Shun Murata, where he looked pretty good in that matchup, and then I believe it was the matchup against Taisei Otsuki. No, it wasn't that one. Was it this one? It was definitely this one. Okay, so I watched him fight against Masaya Ishizuka and Shun Murata. Against Shun Murata, he was just playing with his food for the most part. Shun Murata wasn't that good, was attempting a lot of takedowns against him and wasn't really getting them. And then Masaya Ishizuka, sort of the same situation really, but in this one, Nakamura was actually attempting takedowns for some moments. And Ishizuka actually got a couple of takedowns on him as well. And this ending was quite interesting because Ishizuka, 5 seconds really before the knockout, took down Nakamura and sort of slammed him with a big trip, and then Nakamura kicked him off and stood up immediately and then just knocked him out, and then the ref stepped in, and Nakamura, you know, maybe just didn't notice and then just knocked him out again. So it was a pretty brutal KO win there. One punch power was showcased in that fight, but I do think against this one here, it comes down to if Yojin Park wrestles, because it seems like Yojin Park doesn't wrestle all the time. It's not like something that he goes to all that much. But if he wants to win this matchup, I think he needs to wrestle against Nakamura. So I'm going to pick Yojin Park to win this one here by using his wrestling. And now we move up to Yin Shuai versus Kai Yoshida. Yin Shuai is one of my picks to potentially win the entire tournament. I do believe that this guy does have a genuine skill set. This guy's got very good wrestling. He did lose, of course, on the road to UFC tournament last year against Kiryu Sahota. I thought he won that fight, but is what it is. Since then, he has got a win, but, you know. Yin Shuai, he's a guy that I believe is at the UFC Performance Institute. He's a guy that I've had my eye on for a very long time. I do believe in this guy's skill set. I do believe in his talents. And I do think that he does beat Kai Yoshida in this fight. Kai Yoshida is another one of those strikers that I just don't believe has really good takedown defense. You know, he did get caught in a submission in his last fight. He's coming off a loss coming into this fight. And I don't really understand why they didn't maybe just give the opportunity to this guy, because this guy has 2 really good wins on his resume very recently. But as for Yoshida, from what I was able to see from him, once again, a pretty technical sort of striker, but wasn't able to see all that much. I think it just kind of comes down to one main thing, and that is, does Yin Shui wrestle? And if Yin Shui does wrestle, can he hold Yoshida down? Because the thing that Yin Shui did struggle with a lot in this matchup against Keiichiro Sahota was beating him on the feet for the most part by using his range, because Sahota is a 5'10" flyweight. It's absolutely ridiculous. But I think that Yin Shui, against a smaller opponent, I mean, he's still 5'9", should be able to close the distance and get those takedowns. I do believe that Yin Shui can go out there and get it done in this fight. And this is a very short notice fight. Baergeng Jieleyisi is stepping in on short notice here against Sebastian Szalay. I think I actually said Szalay's surname incorrectly. I do apologize, but Baergeng Jieleyisi is actually a bantamweight. He has fought at bantamweight in the Road to UFC tournament before, and he's actually fought, I believe, for the Road to UFC tournament. I was gonna say more than once, and that is correct, because he fought against Shuai Yin, and in the previous year he did fight and he won, and then he lost to the eventual winner, Su Young Yu. And now he's stepping in on short notice, up a weight class now at 145 pounds against Sebastian Szalay. I am so sorry, guys. I should be able to pronounce this one. But Szalay is the champion of Eternal MMA, and he's actually been fighting in 5-round fights over his last couple of wins. In fact, overall, the entire sort of career that he's had, he has been taking on some pretty good guys. Szalay is a striker. I would say he mostly kind of has a boxing sort of style, and the way that he fights is very dynamic because he can fight from both orthodox and also southpaw stance. I think he throws a lot of punches mostly, and when he does look pretty good. I do think that in some moments, and I will say actually especially in this matchup against Taser Malone was pressuring him a lot, and it did seem like the Sebastian was sort of quite not aggressive, quite reserved, quite patient in that fight. But when he did explode, he looked good. I do think that there were a lot of moments, though, in that fight which Sebastian could have been throwing combinations, or he could have been throwing a leg kick or doing something, when instead he was kind of just following Malone around, where he could have scored points, and obviously made the decision not as close as it was. But Malone was finding a lot of success with the wrestling, and I do think that that is something to note in this one, because Jieleyisi is a wrestler. Now, he does have a very good win, which has aged quite well over Xavier Alaoui, because Xavier Alaoui just recently beat Damate Pena. If you know who Damate Pena is, you will know that that's a pretty top win to have. And Jieleyisi beat him on the feet for the first 2 rounds, or one of the first 2 rounds, I should say, and then went on to wrestle in the 3rd round and found success in the 3rd round of that fight. But then he did rely on his wrestling a lot more in the Road to UFC tournament that he did compete in last year. It's worth noting, though, that he is not a big bantamweight, now coming up to 145 pounds on about a week's notice, to my knowledge anyway. I do think he's going to be undersized in there. Szalay is a pretty big guy at featherweight, and I do think that despite kind of lacking in the finishes, I'm kind of surprised that he doesn't have more finishes, because, you know, Dimps Gillies was eating some pretty big shots from him, and he does land pretty clean pretty regularly. He throws a lot of head kicks too, I should mention as well. But I think Szalay can defend the takedowns of Jieleyisi, and despite Jieleyisi being quite fast and also having very good hands in the pocket, I think Szalay should ultimately be able to win this fight at range using his striking. That was a lot longer of a video than I expected, nearly 20 minutes to break down 5 fights. I'm sorry, but it's just kind of one of those sort of situations where you know, like, I believe a lot of the audience will never have heard of these fighters. I personally hadn't heard of most of these fighters before breaking them down, so I've got to sort of break down everything that they bring to the table instead of UFC breakdowns where I can just reference previous fights, because a lot of you guys would have seen them and would have known them. So with that being said, let me know what you think in the comments below. I'll be uploading my UFC episode 2 breakdown just in a few hours after I upload this one. So I'll see you guys in the next one.